The UN was created not to lead mankind to heaven, but to save humanity from hell. Hi everyone, welcome to the Humane Factor. If you're new to this channel, this is our space to talk about how social issues and policy decisions impact people of the world. Today, I'll be talking about the international organization that has been hailed as the beacon of hope for the future of humanity, the United Nations. Now, the United Nations has certainly made a difference ever since it was established. It has helped end conflicts and foster reconciliation, and has also conducted successful peacekeeping operations in several countries. But it has also been dismissed as a shameful den of dictatorships and has infuriated many with its bureaucracy, cover-ups, corruption, and the undemocratic politics within the Security Council. When I think of what the UN has done, I'm reminded of what the second UN Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld, said. He said that the UN was created not to lead mankind to heaven, but to save humanity from hell. And isn't he right? Now, I will talk about some of the good things the UN has done in another video. But right now, there are so many ongoing international crises, like the situation in North Korea, the genocide of Uyghur Muslims, the persecution of Rohingya Muslims, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and many, many more. The UN hasn't been able to do much or anything about these situations. Today, I'll discuss three major reasons the UN is unable to fulfill its peacekeeping duties. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. This is just to give you a quick idea about some of the major underlying structural and political issues within the United Nations that I think impede it from achieving its own purpose. Now, number one, the UN Security Council and its veto powers. Now, the UN Security Council is the most powerful body within the United Nations, and yet it's also the most problematic one. Now, it's the only body that has the authority to issue legally binding resolutions, enforce sanctions, or even authorize the use of force. Now, it's responsible for maintaining international peace and security. Now, the UN Security Council has 15 members, 5 permanent and 10 non-permanent members. The non-permanent members keep rotating every 2 years, while the permanent members are, well, permanent, as the name suggests. Now, the UN Security Council takes all its decisions by voting. The 5 permanent members, or the P5, are China, France, Russia, the US, and the UK. Now, they enjoy a special voting power called the veto power. A UN resolution needs a minimum of 9 votes in favor and no vetoes from the P5 for it to be passed. This means all 5 of the permanent members have to agree or at least not object to the resolution. So a single negative vote by even one of the permanent members will result in the entire resolution being rejected. Now take a look at this conversation between Alex Janin from Now This and Salil Shetty, the former Secretary General of Amnesty International, about the UN Security Council's veto powers.
I sat down with Salil Shetty, former Secretary General of Amnesty International, to help break down some of the shortcomings of the Security Council's veto power.
The P5 have been accused of at times abusing that power. Do you see it that way?
Well, without question. You have Russia and China sort of on one side, and you have France, UK and the United States on the other. So it's kind of the West versus the rest, and that's how it's been organized, because it's like a club. So the people who are the most powerful members in the club, they make the rules. So they're not going to change the rules in a way that it negates their own interests. So the kind of underlying issue is, that every country in the Security Council is there in order to protect human interests, the interest of humanity as a whole. But they tend to protect their own national interests.
Now, there have been thousands of instances where at least one country has blocked a resolution from being passed. Look at the number of draft resolutions that's been vetoed and never seen the light of day. Isn't it crazy? Now, because of these veto powers, the UN hasn't been able to take action during several humanitarian crises. Many resolutions proposing tough action to deal with certain situations never reach the voting stage because they're almost certainly vetoed. Now, the P5 use this veto power arbitrarily to protect their national interests, uphold a tenet of their foreign policy, or even promote an issue of particular importance to a state. For instance, Russia blocked several Security Council resolutions condemning the Syrian crisis. Let's take a look at the US ambassador's statement to Syria after a resolution that would have condemned the use of chemical weapons in Syria was vetoed.
To Assad and the Syrian government, you had no friends in the world after your horrible actions. The United States is watching your actions very closely. The days of your arrogance and disregard of humanity are over.
Now, the UN has recognized that the existence of veto powers means that the Security Council may not be able to fulfill its purpose. So, the UN has devised an alternative solution for this by giving certain powers to the UN General Assembly. This alternative, which is called Uniting for Peace, gives the General Assembly the power to take action when the Security Council is deadlocked. But the problem is, any action the UN General Assembly suggests is only recommendatory in nature. It isn't binding by any means. The UN General Assembly can't issue or enforce sanctions or employ other coercive tactics to get countries to comply. So, the UN General Assembly resolutions are about as effective as a bouncer in a bar telling you that we recommend that you drink only if you're 21 or older, but we're not going to check your ID or throw you out of the bar if you're younger. Nobody is going to listen to that bouncer. All those crazy kids you see doing vodka shots in a bar, the bouncer didn't check their IDs and they're not 21. Moving on to the second issue, which is corruption and abuse of power. Now, another huge problem within the United Nations is corruption. A study found that there is a link between the distribution of foreign aid payments and rotating membership of the Security Council members. And this pattern is consistent with vote buying. Now, this study also found that aid payments sharply increase in the year in which a country is elected to the UN Security Council, remains high throughout the 2-year term, and then returns to the previous level immediately after the completion of the term. Now, the UN and its organizations are also known to favor countries or entities that it regards powerful. For instance, in 2009, the WHO was quick to announce H1N1 a global pandemic. Then, in 2010, the British Medical Journal published a report that pointed out that the medical scientists who had advised the WHO to declare this pandemic were also paid consultants of large pharmaceutical companies who stood to make millions of dollars in the purchase of global vaccines. Fast forward to 2020, when COVID hit us, and there were obvious signs that if certain measures weren't immediately implemented, it would escalate. The WHO, which has been accused of being very China-centric, was too slow to act. Now, even on an individual level, there's mounting evidence of systemic corruption and misuse of power. For instance, the former head of the UN Oil for Food program in Iraq was accepting kickbacks, while another UN official was soliciting bribes. But the most disgraceful and shameful problem that the UN has had to contend with is the allegations of sexual abuse by its own peacekeepers. Now, UN peacekeepers are individuals deployed by the UN to help restore peace in conflict situations. However, there have been several instances where these peacekeepers have sexually abused women and children. The first official allegations came to light during the UN mission in Cambodia in 1992. This was followed by reports from Bosnia, Haiti, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and East Timor. The worst part is, the people who are abused are already victims of war and humanitarian disasters. Now, most recently, it came to light that the Burundian peacekeepers deployed by the UN in the Central African Republic were involved in the rape and abuse of women and children. What's worse is that the UN pays the government of Burundi around $13 million a year for the use of its military personnel. That money, in turn, finances the government's campaigns of terror, including rape. The unavoidably moral, ethical, and legal question here is, why is the United Nations financing sexual violence against women and girls? Now, after mass protests and outrage, the UN has finally acknowledged this as an issue and is now attempting to address this abuse of power by its peacekeepers. Moving on to the third issue, bureaucracy. Another huge problem within the United Nations is bureaucracy. The UN has several agencies and sub-agencies and an unnecessarily complex structure. Jean-Pierre Lehman, a professor of international political economy, described the UN as a gravy train for a very bloated employment system. Now, there's also a huge overlap between the agencies and their functions. For instance, the UN Economic Commission for Europe often examines the same issues as the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization. Its scope also overlaps with national and regional agencies like the US Food and Drug Administration and the European Food Safety Authority. The Secretariat and related agencies comprise 16 specialized bodies, 4 related organizations, 2 trust funds, and 3 conventions. Under the General Assembly, there are 8 committees and a gazillion boards, councils, working groups, and panels. There are also 11 programs and a dozen subsidiary bodies. Now, the Economic and Social Council has 5 regional commissions, 9 functional commissions, 3 standing committees, and on top of all of that, expert, ad hoc, and related bodies. In reality, many of these organizations simply don't need to be there. Think about all the money the UN is spending to keep all these organizations and agencies running. Billions of dollars could be saved and channeled towards humanitarian relief if many of these organizations are dismantled. So I hope I've been able to give you an idea about three main issues within the UN. Now, this is not to say that the UN is all bad. Like every other structure that's been around for a long time, it just needs to be tweaked to meet global needs as well as address some of these bottlenecks that prevent it from achieving its own goals. So I hope you like this video. Please subscribe to this channel and stay tuned every Wednesday and Saturday for videos on things we should know and speak more about. Until next time.